What makes a perfect book adaptation? Is it getting actors who fit the characters' descriptions to a T and ensuring you keep everything 100% accurate? Or is it enough to tell a good story even if it loses some aspects of the book? Hello and welcome to Bloody Good. My name's Emily and this is From the Page to the Screen, a show where I look at horror media and the books they're based on to determine just how accurate they are. Today I'm edging a little bit more towards thriller because I'm looking at Mystic River by Dennis Lehane and exploring what changes were made from the book to its 2003 film adaptation. Mystic River follows three childhood friends, Jimmy, Sean and Dave, whose lives were forever changed when Dave was abducted. In adulthood, Jimmy's teenage daughter is found brutally murdered, Sean is the homicide detective working the case, and Dave is a suspect. Now to begin with, I know what you're thinking. Emily, this isn't a horror, and I know, but I'm covering it anyway. I watched this film as a teenager and I had no idea it was based on a book, so when I found that out recently, I read it and I wanted to do a comparison anyway. And thrillers are a subgenre, and this story is quite horrific in its own ways, so I'm covering it. First, let's look at our characters. In the book we have Jimmy Marcus, but he's Jimmy Markham in the film, and Jimmy is played by Sean Penn, and this role earned him an Oscar. When they were children, Jimmy was the ringleader of the trio, and as a young adult, he got himself into all sorts of trouble and ended up in prison. While in prison, his wife died, and when he was released, he had a young daughter, Katie, to take care of. He's from the Flats, which is the rougher side of town, and his daughter, Katie, played by Emmy Rossum, is murdered early in the story. I think Sean Penn really sells the role here. He carries that weight of an ex-con well, and he feels really close to the book counterpart. Sean Devine is played by Kevin Bacon, and Sean grew up in the Point, the wealthier area in town, and was close friends with Jimmy as their fathers worked together. Sean grows up to be a state trooper working in the homicide department, and he's working on the murder case of Katie alongside Whitey Powers, who's played by Lawrence Fishburne. In the book, Whitey Powers is described as a middle-aged balding white man, and Lawrence Fishburne obviously isn't that, but he's a great actor and he feels like the book character in personality, so I don't really care that he doesn't look like the part. Dave Boyle is played by Tim Robbins, who also won an Oscar for this role. Dave is from the Flats like Jimmy, and Dave was definitely the third wheel in the friendship and was more of a hanger-on than a real friend, but the other two were nice enough to just kind of keep him around. One fateful day, a car approaches the boys and the men inside it say they're cops. Dave gets in the car and returns as a different boy after enduring a very traumatic 4 days at the hands of those men. As an adult, Dave is a bit of a recluse and becomes a suspect in Katie's murder case. Tim Robbins is great in this role and feels just like Book Dave. He has a really great physicality to his performance and he's really believably a troubled man. We also have Dave's wife Celeste, played by Marcia Gay Harden. She sees Dave come home covered in someone else's blood on the same night that Katie's murdered and grows suspicious of him across the course of the story. She doesn't have an awful lot to do in the film, but she gives a really good performance regardless. And we have Jimmy's second wife, Annabeth, played by Laura Linney, who is Katie's stepmother and the mother of Jimmy's two other daughters. Annabeth is from the Savage family, a very well-known criminal family in the neighbourhood. Her brothers are fiercely loyal to Jimmy and will do just about anything he wants them to, and they were part of his crew before he went to prison. The whole Savage family feels really similar to their book counterparts. Now we've talked about our characters, let's dive into how well the film actually adapts the story from the book. First of all, I want to say that I think Clint Eastwood's direction here is brilliant. He captures this grimy neighbourhood well, and it feels almost like a character in and of itself. The brooding tone of the book is definitely present here in the film. The studio execs at Warner Brothers wanted to shoot in Toronto to save money, but Eastwood refused, instead pushing to have the movie shot in Boston, where the film is set. And I also want to highlight that so much of the dialogue from the book was lifted verbatim and included in the film. There were so many moments while I was watching that I caught dialogue and conversations that were word for word from the book. It's not really often I catch so much specific dialogue from the books included, so that was really, really nice to see here. Obviously, credit there goes to Brian Helgeland for the adapted screenplay. In the special features on my DVD copy, there were some quotes from the author of the book, Dennis Lehane, one of which was, "My reaction to the screenplay was really over the moon. I can't really describe the thrill." While a lot of the dialogue is kept, some of the book is definitely stripped down too. When you've got a book that's around 500 pages long being turned into a 2.5-hour long film, there are going to be cuts. And it happens in most book adaptations, and it's understandable, but that doesn't always mean an adaptation is bad. When we meet the boys at the beginning of the book, they're at a subway station and Jimmy is walking along the tracks to receive a ball, whereas in the film, they're in the street playing hockey. One little detail that was added in the film that I think was a really nice touch was the three boys writing their name in wet cement. Jimmy and Sean go first and write their names, and Dave is in the middle of writing his name when the car pulls up and he gets taken. He never got to finish writing his name, and he never got to live out his childhood properly either. And at the end of the story, his life is ultimately cut short too. And it's just a sad little bit of foreshadowing of Dave's fate right there in the first few minutes of the film. Another change I found really interesting during Dave's abduction at the beginning of the film is that one of the men was wearing a bishop's ring. In the book, there's no mention of any religious jewellery or anything like that, but this was an addition from Eastwood himself, who wanted to include this because of the church scandals that were surfacing at the time due to the brilliant work by the Spotlight team at the Boston Globe. It's definitely an interesting extra layer to the story that adds to the unfortunate realism of this kind of event. The circumstances of Katie's death are different in the book and the film as well. In both, she swerves her car so she doesn't hit something or someone in the road, and then there's a bit of a struggle and she takes off running through the park. In the book, she's found squeezed into a doorway with her back against the wall and curled up with her knees to her chest, with an awful description that once Sean sees her, describing her like a fetus seen through a sonogram screen. It's a really rough description, highlighting Katie's youth and innocence while facing such a brutal death, where she's described as basically having her head split open from the beating. In the film, she was found in a pit in a wooded area of the park. She's beaten and her body is in an odd position, but it didn't get the same reaction out of me as the book because it just wasn't as visceral. And now credit has to go to Sean Penn for his performance after the body is found. Much like the book, Jimmy forces his way into the park to get to the scene and has to be held back by police. Penn's performance here is just brilliant as he shouts and pleads, asking if they found Katie in there. He had an oxygen tank ready to go off screen after the scene, just in case he exerted himself too much. It's one of the standout moments of the film. This performance is just so feral and believable as a desperate father looking for an answer. It takes what was written in the book and just elevates it, and that scene undoubtedly snagged him the Oscar. When Jimmy goes to identify Katie's body, in the book he can barely recognise her because she's been beaten so badly. It's mentioned that she's so beaten and bruised you can't even tell what colour her skin is. The book says her skin was a black purple, a shade Jimmy had never seen before. In the film, when we see Katie on the table, she just looks pale, so it's not quite as dramatic, although Emmy Rossum reportedly said that the scene in the morgue moved her to tears because of Penn's performance. I'd say one of the more interesting differences is surrounding when we find out Katie's dead as well. This happens within the first 30 minutes of the film, but in my copy of the book, she's found on page 186. In the book, we get the time to understand the backdrop of the city and get to know our characters in depth through their internal monologues before it jumps into the mystery aspect, but the film just kind of gets straight there. I think we get incredible performances from our three main characters, but especially so from Sean Penn and Tim Robbins. But it is hard to translate inner monologues to the screen, and this is often where material from books gets missed in their adaptations, which unfortunately does happen in this case. I think the screenplay does its best to translate these inner monologues, mostly from Jimmy and Dave, and less so for Sean. Even though we get the least from Sean, I think the character that actually suffers the most from the cutting of internal monologue is Dave. His story is absolutely heartbreaking, and Tim Robbins delivers a phenomenal performance. In the book, we understand through the internal monologue that Dave is really struggling mentally and is fearful that he is becoming a predator himself, fulfilling that vicious cycle of abuse that sadly often happens to people who faced abuse in their childhood. Dave's story is just so sad, and we hear in great detail in the book how his life was impacted by those 4 days at the hands of those men, and he's trying his best to be a good man because he doesn't want to repeat the cycle himself. He has a moment of weakness where he almost considers it, but ultimately doesn't. This conflict is so engaging to read in the book, and I just don't think it was translated well enough in the film. You obviously still feel really bad for Dave, and that is down to Tim Robbins' performance, but I think showing the true extent of the struggle that Dave is experiencing is where the screenplay was lacking for me. I do think the female characters also get sidelined in this film, especially Celeste. In the book, they're supporting characters to our main men, but their own thoughts and feelings are still explored and have pivotal influence on our main characters, which I just don't think was highlighted as much in the film. I think Marcia Gay Harden did a brilliant job with the role of Celeste, but I wish she'd have just been given more to do, more of that anxiety and confusion surrounding what Dave may have done that night. And with Annabeth, in the book, she's described as one tough goddamn woman, but we don't really see that side of her all that much in the film, except for the final scene where she has a bit of a Lady Macbeth moment. Laura Linney still delivers a brilliant performance here, but again, I wish she just had more to do to kind of highlight her standing in this town with her criminal family background. I was really shocked when I finished the film and logged it on Letterboxd and saw how many negative reviews the film had. I saw a lot of reviews complaining about the ending, but it stuck with the book ending, so you can't blame the film for that. It's obviously a really tough ending, and it sucks. But my god, does it get a reaction? It's awful, but at the end of the day, when a film can make you feel that way, I'd say that's pretty excellent. I think a lot of people miss the point of the ending too. Sean knows that Jimmy killed Dave, but he has no proof, so we can't just arrest him. They see each other on opposite sides of the street at the parade, and Sean points a finger gun at Jimmy, who responds with a bit of a shrug. And so many reviews have taken this as Sean not caring that Jimmy killed Dave, but to me it's clearly him letting Jimmy know that he's got an eye on him and he'll be waiting for him to trip up. In the book, Celeste actually comes up to Sean at the parade and he tells her he's looking into Dave's disappearance, but in the film she sees Sean but doesn't say anything, and then she sees Annabeth, who just glares at her. It's obviously disappointing to know that there's no justice for Dave, but don't blame the film for that, blame Lehane for writing it that way. And yeah, I don't see it as Sean and Jimmy being buddies again. There's definitely a game of cat and mouse going on that will presumably continue after the film ends, and we just don't see it, but we can only hope justice is eventually served. Overall though, I think the film is a really faithful adaptation of the book. When I first watched the film as a teenager, I wasn't sure if I was ever actually going to watch it again because Tim Robbins' performance was just so heartbreaking. So when I found out it was based on a book, I had to watch it again because all those captivating performances just couldn't hold me back. Like I said earlier, a lot of the book plays out through internal monologues, mostly from Jimmy and Dave's perspectives, and both Sean Penn and Tim Robbins do their best to channel these internal monologues through their performances with the screenplay they were given. And I think they absolutely deserve their Oscars. The whole supporting cast absolutely strengthened the film too, especially Marcia Gay Harden's performance as Celeste. She's a really troubled character who's stuck between love and disgust as she battles with what her husband may have done. I'm really torn here about which version I prefer because to me both the book and the film are exceptional. And at the very least I think the film is a brilliant adaptation and captures the spirit of the book perfectly. It's bleak and it's upsetting and it gives us a real deep look at the flaws of all these characters and it's not hiding away from them. But I think based on the detailed internal monologues, I'm gonna have to give it to the book on this occasion. And I'm gonna leave you with one last quote from Lehane. The first time I saw a scene, it was a block and a half away from where I'd been living when I got the idea for the book. The big thing that you're worried about is you're always gonna hear a jarring difference between the voice in your head when you wrote the book and the actors' voices as they say your lines. And I was walking along watching this and it all sounded dead on. It sounded like the voices I had in my head when I was writing. If you've read the book and or seen the film, let me know in the comments what you thought of them and which version you prefer. If you're a fan of horror or thriller books, I previously covered some Stephen King books such as Misery and The Outsider, so check those out in the playlist on our channel and linked on your screen right now too. And if you've got any recommendations for your favourite horror books and their adaptations, please leave them in the comments. I've got an ever-growing list to get through, but I will keep adding your suggestions. And we also want to give a big shout out to our first two members, Roan the Hero and Phantom Crow. We really appreciate all the support we get from everyone who tunes in to us. It doesn't go unnoticed. So if you want to support us and keep making more content like this, you can have a look at what's on offer with our memberships or hit that subscriber button and the little bell so you know when our next videos are out. In the meantime, I've been Emily, this has been Bloody Good, thank you so much for watching.